me, we're going to talk about Pollock and the CIA.
Sure. So you know a little bit about this topic, it sounds like, but some of it is, I think, overblown. And some of it that some people make a little too much out of it. That's my personal opinion. But so I started looking at this because of my book, Con Artist, and because of the James Stunt investigation. I have been contacted by some collectors who will say, look, I'm thinking about buying this piece, or, I've been introduced to this piece. What do you think? Use your investigative chops or whatever and see what you can find out about this thing. Does it seem real, or does it seem, potentially fake? So a person brought to me a Pollock, purported Pollock, not in the catalog. There are a lot of fake Pollocks out there. There are a lot of really bad fakes. There are some pretty good ones. But so he brought me this Pollock that had been in Switzerland. And it came out of Switzerland. It had a provenance behind it that it showed up in Switzerland in the early 50s, mid 50s. It had been in some prominent families in Switzerland. And it had some marks on it from the U.S. consulate and a couple of people. So I started looking at this and, what could this thing be? And, it turns out that in the post-war period, there was a Cold War on, and it was really for the hearts and minds of people.
Propaganda war.
Yeah, exactly. It was a propaganda war, and some of the main propaganda war was being fought for the hearts and minds of intellectuals. So, the Soviet Union was saying, like, look what Western democracies wrought. So what we need is a world where the artist is working for the greater society and is doing basically like a political act, which is for the people. And so what Americans wanted to show was like, no, really our method is the best, whereby we let people be very free.
Yes.
And you just can do whatever you want. You can be a leftist, you can be on the right, you can do whatever, but our society says we get better, richer, smarter, happier when we give people freedom. And so the CIA wanted to counter kind of like, Soviet realism with an art form that would appeal to these people. And they looked at abstract expressionism, like, what Jackson Pollock was doing. And they're like, well, here's this artist. He's a leftist. He's kind of a cowboy kind of guy. He's from Wyoming. He's a big drinker, masculine guy. And he does these paintings that are so free, they don't even have to mean anything. They don't represent anything. They're not impressionist. Here's an impressionistic view of a landscape. They're just like pure expression.
Can you find a photo of Jackson Pollock, Steve? I've never actually looked at a photo of him.
Yeah. He's from Wyoming originally and was, kind of like a cowboy kind of guy before he came to New York.
That's interesting.
Yeah. He was like he drank too much, but he died because of it.
As most of the best artists do.
Yeah. But he was like a heavy drinking, masculine, tough guy sort of vibe. And so they thought, okay, well, we need to push these paintings. And their initial steps at kind of pushing modernism were really terrible and ham-fisted. And there were all these senators who came out and said like, hey, your taxpayers bought this crap. Your taxpayers bought these crappy paintings and brought them around and stuff. So the CIA said, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do this kind of on the down low. And what they did was they set up all of these foundations and stuff that were really CIA fronts to support gallery shows and symposiums and magazines and newspapers and stuff. Like famously, the Paris Review was a CIA front. and founded by these things. And what I found, so anyway, I started doing a lot of research about this particular Pollock painting, and I went and looked in the archives of MoMA and Crystal Bridges and at the Pollock Foundation out in Long Island and stuff. And, you know, I kind of started looking at all of the communications between all of these people. And I mean, there isn't anything that crazy nefarious in my mind here. But you know, they just kind of started pushing this as much as they could, but without really kind of telling anybody that it was the government that was behind this stuff. And what was really interesting to me was
because these people were fundamentally against the government and the wars and everything that was going on.
Yes. So you could kind of show like somebody like Jackson Pollock, he's a leftist. He's a guy who
anti-CIA probably.
Yes. And so you could use him. And I don't think he was in on this. And I don't think there was any big, you know, hey guys, okay, Jackson, we're calling you in for a meeting and this is what we're going to, it wasn't like that at all.
He'd be a useful idiot.
Yes.
As I am, as we all are.
But what was kind of interesting was if you look at all of the people who founded the Museum of Modern Art and the foundations that were related to them, almost all of them were wartime intelligence operatives. So, you know, they were intellectuals. They were not out there, you know, trudging with guns through trenches. They were fighting a cultural war during the war and afterwards. And they just kind of kept doing that as they went forward. So the Museum of Modern Art formed what was called the International Program. And that international program sort of took money and funneled it into these different organizations that then put on shows by Pollock. So what I ended up finding with my painting that I was looking at was, you know, there's a pretty plausible case for this being one of those paintings that ended up going over to Europe and then ended up through Switzerland through the consul. So they were using governmental agencies like the consuls and stuff to put these shows on, to receive the paintings. And, you know, there are like letters where somebody's like, hey, I want to know the price of these paintings that were in this show. And they're like, well, why don't you just ask the consulate? So it was very much kind of like this governmental, you know, like, why does the consulate have the prices of these Jackson Pollock paintings that appeared in this show in Paris? And it's because they were kind of, you know, using this soft power stuff. So I don't think it's a big cloak and dagger, you know, spy kind of situation, but I think it's just another one of these kind of soft power governmental things. But what I found, I mean, the thing's kind of interesting is there is a very plausible case for this painting. And I, as a person who likes evidence, goes, that's great. I can make up a story about anything. But now let's go take a look at this, at the actual, what paint is there? Is this wood from the period? Is this paint real? You know, because the one thing that's cool about Jackson Pollock is that somebody had the bright idea, because he painted on the floor. He had just unstretched canvas, just cloth on the floor, and he would drip paint on the floor and use sticks and things to kind of spatter paint and whatever. The studio has all kinds of paint on the floor.
Right.
So a few years ago, somebody went, took samples of all that paint and did what's called
on the floor.
Yeah.
Oh, his studio is still intact.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So they went and they took all those paint samples and they did what's called Raman spectroscopy. It's an imaging thing that gives you basically signatures of elements. So you can go,
the chemical makeup or whatever. Correct.
So you can go, okay, well, this paint in this painting that I'm looking at has the exact same paint as the paint that's on the studio floor. And they also did that analysis on a couple of known Pollock paintings. So one of them is called Alchemy 1A. Yeah,
whoa,
there you go.
That's wild,
yes.
Dude.
So you can do that. So I have been working with a well-known university laboratory that does, you know, kind of Nobel level research, not related at all to art, because I wanted to go to a place that did not deal with art. because for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
One of them being that, it's my impression that you can, in some places, buy the result you want. So I didn't want to have any bias or any, kind of previous knowledge or any, these people don't care about this. It's an art thing. It's interesting to them, but it's not what they do. So they can look at it in a dispassionate way. And much to my surprise, at every step, it kind of keeps going forward. Yes, it matches the paint. Does the blue match? Yeah, the blue matches. Does the red match? Yeah, the red matches. It matches the floor and it matches Alchemy 1A or whatever. And so you keep going forward, and then, you do this radiocarbon dating.
Yeah.
So, and the thing that's interesting about radiocarbon dating is that because there was a lot of nuclear testing starting in the late 50s and into the 60s, there's a very specific signature from that blast of stuff that was, it's not present in stuff that started, that came earlier.
Interesting.
So if you do radiocarbon and you're looking for isotope 14, carbon 14, if you're looking for carbon 14 and it's not there, then it probably predates. And then they stopped atmosphere.
Anything?
Yeah.
Like anything?
Most stuff, I think.
Wow.
Again, no expert, but you can do it on paint. You can do it on linen. You can do it on the wood of the stretcher bars and stuff. But what's also interesting is that you can, because they then stopped testing, it kind of died off, right? So depending on where that level of carbon 14 is, you can sort of say, well, I think that's probably 1962 to 1964. In our case, the painting is, supposedly from 48, 49. So if you find evidence of lots of nuclear testing, it couldn't have been, right? Because that would have been after. So it's really interesting that you can do all of these things, whereas before you would just kind of say, as an expert, yes or no. Now you can actually do all of these things, which are, kind of irrefutable science. So I went and I did all the stuff that I know about. And, yes, this kind of makes sense. Here's all this evidence. Here's notes saying that these paintings were sent from France to Switzerland. They were sent to the consulate and all this kind of stuff. That gets you somewhere there, right? But then when you really look at the paint and all that other stuff, that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. But, and here's art, here's where art is interesting. A lot of people will tell you, like, that's all well and good. That's fine. However, if the experts with connoisseurship, their eye, don't like it, good luck. Good luck.
Really?
Despite having all the evidence.
No matter how much scientific data you have.
Good luck.
You have to have the people connected to the institutions.
Yeah.
And the nod.
Yeah. And also because I think part of that is, I think it's good to have like all of it. But I think there's also some reluctance on the part of some institutions to say, like, yes, okay, you did not use us in any part of this, or you did not sort of get our okay. So therefore we are withholding it.